So we're here in the week of World Day of Prayer for Vocations, and we're praying together for vocations for the priesthood and religious life for our Diocese of Rockhampton, and also thinking about our theme this year of Do Not Be Afraid. And today we're joined by one of our seminarians for the Rockhampton Diocese, Peter Doherty. So thank you very much for joining us today, Peter, to share a little bit about your journey of vocation.
Thanks, Michael. It's great to be here, and thanks for the invitation.
So to start off with, do you mind sharing with us when was the first time you considered that it was possible you might become a Catholic priest?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question, Michael. You know, when I was a young fellow in Bundaberg, I was an altar boy, and I knew some really fantastic priests who I served. And I looked at them and I thought, gee, they're doing a good job, and maybe that's something that I could do in the future. So the first interior sense of a call to the Catholic priesthood really started when I was at primary school, and it did continue on throughout high school in different ways.
Very good. And in those early years, what were some of the kind of feelings or emotions that you had about the idea of being a priest?
I just liked the way that the priests that I knew from the Diocese of Rockhampton reached out to the parishioners. I was really intrigued by some of the homilies that the priests from the Diocese of Rockhampton gave, and I also appreciated the liturgical reverence that I saw pretty close up on the altar, being an altar boy. Those were sort of the three highlights of what attracted me in the first place.
Yeah. And were there any kind of fears or anxieties associated with the idea of being a priest for you? Or?
Yeah, as a young fellow, and of course this is going back some time, my sense of discernment was fairly broad. As I became an older teenager, I became interested in a range of other interests, and I never really dismissed the possibility of being a Catholic priest as an older teenager, but I certainly became more aware of other options and other opportunities, and other avenues and pathways that were open to me.
Very good. And can you talk us through a little bit about how did you go through the process of, like you said, you had that call that you'd maybe had in your mind for a while. How did you go through the process of actually discerning that, this is really what God's calling you to, and I want to respond to that call?
I guess as I became older, I recognised that even though I'd worked in some really interesting places and had the opportunity to travel, lived in some very interesting places, I recognised that the interior sense of a call to the Catholic priesthood was still present within me. And I recognised that I'd got to a point where I needed some accompaniment about how to discern that in a more full or more complete way. That while it's important while I considered it was important to discern this call in the interior sanctuary of my heart, I really needed assistance and guidance and accompaniment to see whether or not this call could be lived authentically, visibly and exteriorly in the church and in the wider world.
So obviously that accompaniment helped you to make that decision?
Yeah, I went to a Quo Vadis weekend, which is a retreat for people interested in the priesthood at Holy Spirit Seminary. I also spoke at length to my wonderful parish priest in a parish in Brisbane where I was living at the time about this sense, and he was very supportive of me continuing the journey of discernment. And of course the Diocese of Rockhampton, which is my home diocese, having been born in Bundaberg, has provided outstanding and really wonderful support in the journey of accompaniment in the past few years. Very visibly now, of course, I do live at Holy Spirit Seminary, and it's all about the journey, and it's all about the accompaniment there.
So you're in your third year at the seminary this year?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about what's been your experience for the last 2 and a bit years of being at the seminary and really intentionally discerning your vocation and preparing for becoming a priest.
I guess the highlight of my experience at the seminary is the community life. I have been welcomed into that community with open arms, and the opportunity to live and to work and to pray and to discern with other like-minded people has been a true blessing and really, really, really wonderful. Holy Spirit Seminary has a program that looks at the 4 dimensions of formation, which are the intellectual, the pastoral, the human and the spiritual. And my experiences of all of those dimensions has really helped to contextualise and to crystallise what was once an interior sense and is helping to bring that sense out into the world.
Wow. And for anyone who might be watching this and still potentially discerning their own vocation, what would be your advice to someone trying to discern their vocation?
You know, I guess if you are a person who is watching this video and you have any sense that you might have an interior call to discern the Catholic priesthood, now that might be a 5% sense, right through to a 95% sense, then you can only do so much on your own. And you might have found yourself being a person who was praying more. You might have found yourself being a person who is getting involved in your local parish more. You might have found yourself reading more about theology and spirituality and wanting to learn more about the church. But if you're doing these things on your own, it will only ever take you so far. And so I would sincerely encourage you to take the next step, and that's to reach out to your local parish priest or to your vocations officer, like Michael here is in the Diocese of Rockhampton, and begin the journey from the interior sense of discernment to the exterior sense. And the great thing about the discernment journey is that there is no right or wrong answer. You will always get the right answer if it's done with a sense of sincerity, a sense of authenticity, and with the spirit of goodwill.
Thank you so much, Peter, for sharing that great advice with us and sharing a bit about your journey and your experience. Tomorrow we'll be joined by Father Andrew Chase from Gladstone Parish, and we'll hear a bit about his experience of discerning the priesthood. And let's continue this week to pray for vocations to the priesthood and religious life for the Diocese of Rockhampton. And today we might especially pray in thanksgiving for seminarians, which this year is Peter, and also Ashwin and Grant, who are in the seminary this year as well.